The space station floated in the dark between stars. It was huge, bigger than most cities back on Earth. The station had thick metal walls and powerful weapons all around it. But even with all those defenses, the people inside were scared. Deep inside the station, in the most secure lab they had, something terrible lived in a cage. The scientists called it Subject 47, but everyone else just called it the Warbeast. It was 12 feet tall and looked like a nightmare come to life. Its skin was black as space and harder than steel. It had 6 arms that ended in claws sharp enough to cut through spaceship walls. Dr. Marcus Kane stood outside the creature's cage, watching it pace back and forth. He had been studying alien life forms for 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for this thing. The Warbeast had a long skull filled with teeth that could bite through armor. Its 6 eyes were each as big as a man's fist, and they glowed with an angry red light. The creature never stopped moving. It walked from one side of its cage to the other over and over again. Sometimes it would stop and stare at the scientists watching it. When it did that, everyone felt cold fear run down their backs. The thing looked at them like it was planning how to kill them all. Commander Lisa Torres walked into the observation room. She was a tough woman who had fought in many space battles, but even she looked worried. She had been in charge of this project for 3 months now, and nothing was working. Every day that passed made the people in charge more angry. "Any progress today?" she asked Dr. Kane. The doctor shook his head. "Same as always. It won't cooperate with anything we try." The Warbeast had been captured during a raid on an enemy base. The Zephyrians were Earth's enemies in a war that had been going on for 5 years. Human soldiers had found the creature in a special laboratory where the Zephyrians were making bioweapons. It had killed dozens of Zephyrian soldiers before the humans could capture it with special stun weapons. At first, the military leaders were excited. They thought they had captured a powerful weapon that could help them win the war. But the creature refused to be controlled. It would not follow orders. It would not let anyone touch its mind. It seemed to hate everyone equally. The scientists had tried everything they could think of. They brought in mind readers from different alien species. These beings could usually control any creature's thoughts, but the Warbeast drove them insane. One mind reader from the planet Altair had tried to take control of the creature's brain. The alien had screamed for hours before his mind broke completely. They tried putting computer chips in the creature's head to control it. The Warbeast's body somehow melted the chips before they could work. They tried talking to it in every language they knew. The creature just stared back with those horrible red eyes. The worst part was how smart it seemed to be. Every time the scientists came up with a new way to contain it, the Warbeast figured out how to break free. It had escaped from its cage 17 times. Each time it killed someone before they could stop it. The creature seemed to understand human technology better than most humans did. It knew exactly where to hit the walls to cause the most damage. It could tell when the force fields were weakest. It was like fighting an enemy who knew all their secrets. Dr. Kane remembered the first escape attempt. The Warbeast had somehow figured out the lock code by watching the guards type it in just once. When the cage door opened, it had moved faster than anything that big should be able to move. 3 security guards died before they could even draw their weapons. After that, they changed the locks every day. But the creature always found a new way out. It would wait until the night shift when there were fewer people around. Then it would break free and hunt through the station's corridors like a monster from a horror movie. The people on the station were terrified. Everyone knew that the thing in the deep labs wanted to kill them all. Some workers asked to be transferred to other stations. Others just quit and went back to Earth. The ones who stayed had trouble sleeping at night. Commander Torres looked at the creature through the thick glass wall. The Warbeast stopped pacing and turned to stare directly at her. Its 6 eyes seemed to burn with hatred. When it opened its mouth, rows of sharp teeth gleamed in the light. The sound it made was almost like laughter, but there was no humor in it. It sounded like the creature was laughing at how helpless they all were. "High Command sent another message today," Torres said quietly. "They want results, or they want us to get rid of this thing." Dr. Kane nodded. He had been expecting this. The war was not going well for humanity. Earth's colonies were being attacked every day. Millions of people had died already. The military leaders were getting desperate for any advantage they could find. "How much time do we have?" he asked. "1 week," Torres replied. "If we can't make it work by then, they're going to shoot it into the nearest star." Both humans watched as the Warbeast pressed its face against the glass. Up close, they could see scars all over its black skin. Some looked old, like they had been there for years. Others were fresh from its fights with the guards. The creature had been hurt many times, but it never seemed to get weaker. Dr. Kane had started to wonder if they were making a mistake. The creature was definitely dangerous, but there was something in its eyes that bothered him. Sometimes when it thought no one was looking, the Warbeast looked sad instead of angry. It was just for a second, but the doctor had noticed it. "What if it doesn't want to be a weapon?" he asked quietly. Torres looked at him with surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if the Zephyrians were forcing it to fight? What if it's not naturally violent?" The commander shook her head. "Look at it, Marcus. That thing is built for killing. Every part of its body is a weapon." But Dr. Kane wasn't so sure anymore. He had been studying the creature's behavior for months. Yes, it was incredibly dangerous. Yes, it had killed people, but it only attacked when it was cornered or when someone tried to hurt it first. It never killed for fun like some predators did. The Warbeast stepped back from the glass and resumed its endless pacing. Its claws clicked on the metal floor with each step. The sound echoed through the observation room like a countdown timer. Click, 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 1 week left, click, 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 then into the star. As the two humans left the lab, neither of them noticed the small ventilation grate near the ceiling. It was too small for an adult to fit through, but a child might be able to squeeze inside. And somewhere in the station's family quarters, an 8-year-old boy was getting very curious about the restricted areas his mother had told him to avoid. The Warbeast stopped pacing for a moment and looked up at the ventilation grate. "It's 6. Red Eyes stared at the small opening for a long time. Then it made a soft sound, almost like a sigh, and went back to walking from wall to wall in its prison. 3 days later, a civilian transport ship called the Wandering Star docked with the space station. The ship brought supplies, new workers, and a few families who were traveling to other colonies. Most of the time, these arrivals were routine and boring. But this time was different. Dr. Helen Carter stepped off the transport ship with her 8-year-old son, Jake. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Helen was a specialist in alien psychology, which meant she studied how different alien species thought and behaved. She was traveling to a new job on a research station in the Centauri system. Jake Carter was small for his age, with messy brown hair and bright, curious eyes behind thick glasses. He carried a worn backpack full of his most important possessions. While other kids his age played with toys and games, Jake collected information about alien species. He had thousands of pictures and facts stored in his portable computer, and he could identify more alien races than most trained scientists. The boy had always been different from other children. His teachers said he was very smart but thought about things in unusual ways. He noticed patterns that adults missed. He asked questions that made people uncomfortable. His mother loved him dearly but sometimes worried about how he would fit in with other people. Helen had hoped to keep Jake away from the dangerous parts of the space station. She knew about the classified research happening in the deep labs, though she did not know the details. The station commander had assured her that the family quarters were completely safe and far from any restricted areas. But Jake had a talent for getting into places he was not supposed to be. Back on Earth, he had once wandered into a military base while chasing what he thought was an interesting bird. Another time, he had somehow ended up in the basement of a government building while looking for a bathroom. His mother called it his curiosity problem. On his second day aboard the station, Jake was supposed to stay in the family recreation area while his mother attended meetings. The area had games, books, and other activities for children, but Jake found it boring. He had already read all. The books and the games were too simple for him, so he decided to explore. The station was much bigger than any place Jake had ever lived. It had hundreds of corridors, thousands of rooms, and dozens of different levels. Most areas were clearly marked with signs that told people where they could and could not go. Jake could read very well for his age, but he pretended not to understand the warning signs. He started by following a maintenance robot that was cleaning the floors. The robot moved through corridors that regular people never used. Jake stayed, far enough behind that the robot did not notice him, but close enough that he would not get lost. The maintenance corridors were darker and quieter than the main areas of the station. Jake liked the peaceful feeling. He could hear the hum of the station's engines and the whisper of air moving through the ventilation system. Sometimes he heard voices from behind closed doors, but they were muffled and distant. After following the robot for almost an hour, Jake came to an area where the corridors were different. The walls were thicker here, and there were more security cameras. Signs warned that only authorized personnel were allowed past this point. Jake knew he was getting close to something important. The maintenance robot went through a door that required a special card to open. Jake was too small to reach the card reader anyway, but he noticed something else. Near the ceiling, there was a ventilation grate that looked loose. One corner had come away from the wall, leaving a gap just big enough for a small person to squeeze through. Jake was an excellent climber. He had always been good at getting into high places, much to his mother's worry. He found a maintenance ladder attached to the wall and climbed up to the loose grate. With some careful wiggling, he managed to pull it open far enough to crawl inside. The ventilation shaft was dark and cramped, but Jake was not afraid of small spaces. He crawled forward slowly, following the flow of air. The metal shaft made soft echoing sounds as he moved, but he tried to be as quiet as possible. After crawling for what felt like a long time, Jake saw light ahead. There was another grate, and through it he could see into a large room. He crawled closer and looked through the openings in the metal grate. What he saw took his breath away. The room was enormous, with a high ceiling and walls covered in complex equipment. Banks of computers lined one wall, their screens showing charts and numbers that Jake did not understand. But it was not the technology that amazed him. It was the creature in the center of the room. Jake had seen pictures of thousands of different alien species, but nothing like this. The creature was huge, much bigger than any alien he had studied. It stood on 4 legs but had 2 additional arms that ended in claws. Its skin was dark and looked harder than metal. 6 red eyes were arranged around its long skull, and when it opened its mouth, Jake could see rows of sharp teeth. The boy should have been terrified. Any normal child would have screamed and tried to run away. But Jake was not normal. Instead of fear, he felt excitement and curiosity. This was a completely new species, one that was not in any of his databases. The creature was pacing back and forth inside what looked like a large cage made of clear material. Jake could tell it was frustrated and unhappy. Its movements reminded him of the tigers he had seen at the zoo back on Earth, walking endlessly in their enclosures because they had nowhere else to go. As Jake watched, the creature suddenly stopped pacing. All 6 of its red eyes turned toward his hiding spot. For a moment, the boy thought he had been discovered. His heart beat faster and he prepared to crawl away quickly, but the creature did not seem angry or threatening. Instead, it tilted its head to one side like a dog that had heard an interesting sound. It took a step closer to Jake's side of the cage, moving slowly and carefully. Jake pressed his face closer to the ventilation grate. The creature was even more amazing up close. He could see details that had not been visible from farther away. There were scars on its dark skin, some old and some new. Its 6 eyes were not just red but had different shades and patterns in them. Its claws were longer than Jake's whole hand, but they looked almost delicate, like they were made for more than just fighting. The creature approached the wall of its cage until it was only a few feet away from where Jake was hidden. It lowered its great head and looked directly at the ventilation grate. There was no doubt now that it knew the boy was there. Jake did something that would have horrified every adult on the station. He smiled and waved at the creature, the same friendly greeting he gave to every new person or alien he met. The effect on the creature was immediate and startling. Its 6 eyes widened with what looked like surprise. It took a step back, then forward again, as if it could not believe what it was seeing. For the first time since its capture, the Warbeast looked at something without hatred or anger. Very slowly, the creature raised one of its massive clawed hands. It pressed the tip of one claw against the clear wall of its cage, directly opposite, where Jake's small hand was pressed against the ventilation grate. The boy could not touch the creature through the barriers between them, but somehow it felt like they were making contact anyway. Jake had always been good at understanding animals and aliens. He seemed to know what they were thinking, even when they could not speak his language. Looking at this huge, scary creature, he did not see a monster. He saw something that was sad and lonely and far from home. The creature made a soft sound, much quieter than the roars and growls that the scientists had recorded. It sounded almost like a cat purring, but deeper and more musical. Jake had never heard anything like it, but somehow he understood that it was not a threatening sound. For several minutes, the boy and the alien creature looked at each other through the barriers that separated them. Jake felt a strange connection forming, something he had never experienced with any other living thing. It was as if the creature was trying to tell him something important, something that the adult scientists had missed completely. In the distance, Jake could hear voices getting louder. People were looking for him. His mother would be worried, and the station security would be angry if they found him in a restricted area. He knew he should leave before he got into serious trouble. But as he prepared to crawl back through the ventilation shaft, Jake made a decision that would change everything. Instead of running away and forgetting what he had seen, he decided to come back. The creature needed a friend, and Jake had always been good at making friends with beings that others found scary or strange. He pressed his hand against the grate one more time and whispered, "I'll come back soon, okay?" The creature's 6 eyes followed him as he crawled away into the darkness of the ventilation shaft. For the first time in months, Subject 47 was not pacing angrily in its cage. Instead, it stood perfectly still, staring at the place where a small human child had shown the first kindness it had received since its capture. Jake kept his promise. Every day for the next week, he found ways to sneak back to the ventilation shaft that led to the creature's cage. His mother thought he was playing in the recreation area or exploring the safe parts of the station. She had no idea that her son was making friends with the most dangerous being in known space. Each visit lasted longer than the one before. Jake would crawl through the dark shaft and sit by the grate, talking quietly to the creature he had started calling Big Guy. He told the alien about his life on Earth, about his collection of alien species cards, and about how excited he was to see new worlds. The creature would sit close to the wall and listen, its 6 red eyes focused completely on the small boy. Jake noticed things about Big Guy that the scientists had missed. The creature was careful never to damage its cage when Jake was watching. It moved more quietly when the boy was there. Most importantly, it never made the angry roaring sounds that echoed through the lab at other times. With Jake, Big Guy was gentle and calm. The boy also started to understand that the creature was trying to communicate with him. It would make soft sounds and move its hands in certain ways. Sometimes Jake felt strange pictures forming in his mind, like half-remembered dreams. He began to realize that Big Guy was somehow putting thoughts directly into his head. On the 7th day, Jake's secret was discovered. Dr. Helen Carter had been growing worried about her son. Jake seemed tired and distracted, and she often found dust and dirt on his clothes that he could not explain. When she asked him about his activities, he gave vague answers that did not make sense. She decided to follow him. Helen was shocked when she saw Jake crawl into a ventilation shaft in a restricted area of the station. She immediately contacted security and demanded to know where that shaft led. When they told her it went to the high-security laboratory, she felt her heart stop. The alarm sirens began wailing throughout the station. Red lights flashed in every corridor as security teams rushed toward the laboratory. Commander Torres and Dr. Kane ran through the halls, with a squad of heavily armed Marines behind them. They were sure they would find Jake's torn and bloody body when they reached the lab. Instead, they found something that made them question everything they thought they knew. Jake was sitting cross-legged on the floor of the observation deck, just outside the creature's cage. He was talking softly to Big Guy, who was sitting as close to the boy as the barrier would allow. The creature's massive form was relaxed and peaceful. Its 6 eyes were focused on Jake with an expression that looked almost gentle. "Jake," Dr. Carter shouted as she burst into the room with the security team. The boy looked back at the adults with mild annoyance. "You need to be quieter," he said in a matter-of-fact voice. "Loud noises make him nervous." Commander Torres stared at the scene in front of her. The Warbeast that had killed 17 people was sitting calmly like a giant pet. Its claws, which could slice through steel, were pressed gently against the barrier near Jake's small hands. Dr. Kane stepped forward carefully. His scientific mind was racing with questions. "Jake, can you understand what it's saying to you?" Jake shook his head. "He doesn't really talk with words like we do, but he shows me pictures in my head. And I can feel what he's feeling." The boy turned back to look at Big Guy. "He's very sad and very lonely, and he's been hurt a lot." The creature made a low rumbling sound that the computers had always classified as threatening. But coming from it now, the sound was soft and almost musical. Jake smiled and made a similar sound back, though his human voice could not match the deep tones. "His name isn't Subject 47, Jake continued. "That's just what you call him, because you don't know his real name. His real name is something like Razor Wind Through Dark Spaces. But that's hard to say, so I just call him Big Guy." Dr. Carter moved closer to her son, though she stayed well back from the creature's cage. "Jake, this thing is very dangerous. It has hurt people." "Only when they tried to hurt him first," Jake replied. "He doesn't like fighting. He's not supposed to be a fighter at all." Commander Torres exchanged glances with Dr. Kane. This was not what they had expected to hear. According to their intelligence, the creature was a bioweapon created by the enemy for warfare. "What do you mean he's not supposed to be a fighter?" Dr. Kane asked carefully. Jake was quiet for a moment, his hand still pressed against the barrier, while Big Guy's claw remained opposite it. The boy's eyes took on a distant look, as if he was seeing something far away. "He's from a place where the stars sing," Jake said slowly. "His people are called the Star Shepherds. They don't fight wars. They protect things. They keep bad things from hurting planets and the people who live on them." The adults in the room listened with growing amazement as Jake continued to translate the creature's mental communications. "Big Guy says his people watch over younger races like humans. They push dangerous asteroids away from planets. They fix things when suns get too hot or too cold. They've been doing this for millions of years." Dr. Kane felt his understanding of the situation shifting completely. If that's true, then how did he end up as a Zephyrian bioweapon? Jake's expression became very sad. "The bad aliens took him when he was just a kid like me. They took him from his family and his home. They tried to make him angry all the time. They did terrible things to him to make him want to hurt people." Big Guy made another soft sound and Jake nodded as if he understood perfectly. "He says they used machines and chemicals and other bad things to change his mind. They wanted to turn his protecting feelings into hurting feelings. It made him very sick in his thoughts." The boy looked up at the adults with tears in his eyes. He's been alone for so long. He remembers what he was supposed to be, but the bad things they did to him make it hard to be good sometimes. That's why he gets angry and hurts people. He can't always control it. Commander Torres felt a chill run down her spine. If Jake was right, then they had been trying to use a kidnapped and tortured victim as a weapon. The ethical implications were staggering. Dr. Carter knelt down next to her son. "Jake, are you sure about all this? How can you know what he's thinking?" "I don't know how," Jake admitted, "but I can see his memories sometimes. I can see his home, planet with purple skies and singing crystals. I can see his family, and they're huge and beautiful and kind. I can see the bad aliens taking him away when he was small." The creature suddenly stood up and moved to the back of its cage. Its 6 eyes were scanning the assembled humans with wariness. The peaceful moment was broken. Jake looked concerned. "He wants to know if you're going to try to make him hurt people too. He's scared you'll do the same bad things to him that the others did." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Every adult in the room understood what the boy was saying. They had captured what they thought was a weapon, but they had actually captured a victim. Dr. Kane was the first to speak. "Jake, can you tell him that we don't want to hurt him? Can you tell him we want to help?" Jake closed his eyes and pressed both hands against the barrier. Big Guy approached slowly and placed his claws opposite the boy's hands. For several long minutes, they stayed connected in their strange mental communication. When Jake opened his eyes, he was smiling. He says he wants to believe you, but he's been hurt so many times that trust is very hard for him. He says humans feel different from the bad aliens, but he's not sure if different means better. Commander Torres made a decision that would change the course of the war. Dr. Kane, I want you to halt all attempts to weaponize this creature. We're going to figure out how to help him instead. But High Command expects results, Dr. Kane protested. Then we'll give them results, Torres replied firmly. Just not the kind they were expecting. If this creature's people are protectors of younger races, then we need to find a way to contact them. They might be willing to help us against the Zephyrians. Jake looked up at the commander with hope in his young eyes. You really want to help, big guy? Yes, Torres said. But we're going to need your help, Jake. You're the only one who can talk to him. The boy nodded seriously. This was the most important job anyone had ever given him, and he was determined to do it right. He turned back to Big Guy and began the slow process of building trust between two very different species. For the first time since his capture, Razor Wind through dark spaces began to hope that he might someday see the singing stars of home again. And it was all because one small human child had seen past his fearsome appearance to the gentle soul trapped inside. After the discovery of Jake's friendship with Big Guy, everything on the space station changed. Commander Torres gave special permission for Jake to visit the creature every day under careful supervision. Dr. Kane and Dr. Carter worked together to document everything the boy learned from his mental conversations with the alien. Jake became the official translator between Big Guy and the human scientists. He spent hours each day sitting by the creature's cage, sharing thoughts and memories. Through their strange connection, what emerged was a story that shocked everyone who heard it. The creature's people, the Star Shepherds, were ancient beings who had existed for millions of years. They were huge and powerful, but they used their strength to protect smaller, weaker species throughout the galaxy. Jake learned that Star Shepherds could live for thousands of years, and during that time they devoted themselves to keeping younger civilizations safe. Big Guy shared memories of his home world through Jake's mind. The planet had purple skies and floating crystals that sang beautiful songs. The Star Shepherds lived in great cities built into mountainsides, where they studied the movements of stars and planets. When they detected threats to inhabited worlds, they would travel through space to stop them. They push asteroids away from planets, Jake explained to the scientists during one of their daily meetings. They fix solar flares that might hurt people. They even help new species learn about space travel when they're ready. Dr. Kane was fascinated by these revelations. How do they travel between stars? Do they have faster-than-light ships? Jake closed his eyes and concentrated on the images Big Guy was sharing with him. They don't need ships like we do. They can fly through space by themselves. They wrap themselves in energy fields that protect them from radiation and cold. The boy opened his eyes and looked sad. Big Guy says he was too young to learn how to do that when the bad aliens took him. He was still a child by his people's standards, even though he was already bigger than any human. The story of Big Guy's capture was heartbreaking. The Zephyrians had attacked a Star Shepherd nursery world where the young ones learned to use their abilities. Big Guy's real name, Razor Wind through dark spaces, had been given to him because he was learning to fly between the stars like the wind moves through trees. He was playing with his friends when the attack happened, Jake translated, tears running down his cheeks. The adult Star Shepherds tried to protect all the children, but there were too many enemy ships. Big Guy and some other young ones were captured and taken away. Dr. Carter, who had been taking careful notes, looked up from her computer. How long ago did this happen? Jake was quiet for a long moment as he communicated with Big Guy. He's not sure exactly. Time is different for his people, but he thinks it was about 50 of our years ago. The humans in the room exchanged shocked glances. The creature had been a prisoner for half a century, tortured and experimented on for most of his life. It was a miracle that any part of his original personality had survived. The Zephyrians had spent decades trying to corrupt Big Guy's natural protective instincts. They used painful machines, mind-altering chemicals, and psychological torture to try to turn him into a weapon of war. They wanted to use his natural desire to protect people and twist it into a desire to destroy them. They put bad thoughts in his head, Jake explained. Thoughts that told him all other species were enemies that needed to be destroyed. They made him watch terrible things happen to innocent people and told him it was good. They hurt him whenever he tried to be kind or gentle. The process had nearly driven Big Guy insane. For years, he had fought against the artificial programming the Zephyrians tried to install in his mind. But the constant torture and brainwashing had taken their toll. By the time human soldiers found him, he was trapped between his true nature and the violent impulses that had been forced into his thoughts. Sometimes the bad thoughts win, Jake said quietly. That's when he gets angry and hurts people. He doesn't want to do it, but he can't always stop himself. It makes him feel terrible afterward. Dr. Kane began to understand why all their previous attempts to control or communicate with the creature had failed. They had been trying to dominate a being whose mind was already at war with itself. Instead of helping him find peace, they had been adding to his mental torment. Jake's approach was completely different. The boy never tried to control or command Big Guy. Instead, he simply offered friendship and understanding. He listened to the creature's stories without judgment. He shared his own experiences of feeling different and misunderstood. Most importantly, he consistently showed Big Guy kindness, which the alien had almost forgotten existed. The breakthrough came during Jake's second week as official translator. The boy had been telling Big Guy about his home on Earth, describing the blue skies and white clouds that he missed. In return, Big Guy began sharing deeper memories of his homeworld. "He's showing me his family," Jake said with wonder in his voice. His parents were huge, even bigger than him. They were teachers who helped young star shepherds learn to protect planets. Big Guy had brothers and sisters, too. Jake's eyes grew wide as more images flowed through his mind. They're still alive. His family is still alive. They've been looking for him all these years. This news energized everyone on the research team. If Big Guy's people were still searching for him, there might be a way to contact them. The Star Shepherds could be powerful allies in the war against the Zephyrians, especially since they had their own reasons to hate the enemy. But first, they needed to help Big Guy heal from decades of psychological damage. Dr. Carter suggested a new approach based on therapy techniques used with traumatized humans. Instead of trying to suppress the artificial violent programming, they would help Big Guy strengthen his original personality until it could overcome the forced changes. Jake became essential to this process. Every day he would sit with Big Guy and help him remember who he used to be. They would go through memories of the creature's peaceful life before his capture. Jake would encourage Big Guy to focus on his natural protective instincts rather than the violent urges that had been implanted. "Remember how good it felt to help people," Jake would say during their sessions. "Remember how proud your parents were when you learned to push dangerous rocks away from planets." Slowly, Big Guy began to change. The angry red glow in his 6 eyes started to fade, replaced by a calmer light. He stopped pacing endlessly in his cage and began to sit quietly, as if meditating. Most importantly, he stopped trying to escape or attack the guards who brought him food. The creature also began to show interest in helping the humans understand his people's technology. Through Jake, he described advanced techniques for space, travel, planetary protection, and energy manipulation that were far beyond human science. Dr. Kane realized they were receiving knowledge that could advance human civilization by centuries. But Big Guy's most important gift was something much simpler. Through his friendship with Jake, he began to remember what it felt like to care about someone else's well-being. The protective instincts that the Zephyrians had tried so hard to corrupt were slowly returning to their original purpose. "He wants to protect me," Jake told his mother one evening after a particularly long session with Big Guy. "Not because someone ordered him to, but because he cares about me. That's what his people are supposed to do. Care about others and keep them safe, Doctor." Carter hugged her son tightly. She was proud of what Jake had accomplished, but she also worried about the bond forming between the boy and the dangerous alien. "Are you sure you're safe with him, Jake?" The boy nodded confidently. Big guy would never hurt me. He's remembering how to be good again. The bad thoughts are getting quieter every day. As if to prove Jake's point, Big Guy began displaying behaviors that amazed the scientific team. When maintenance workers needed to repair equipment near his cage, the creature would move to the far side and sit perfectly still, making no threatening moves. When Dr. Kane accidentally dropped his tablet during one observation session, Big Guy gently pushed it back through the barrier with one careful claw. Most remarkably, Big Guy started trying to communicate with other humans besides Jake. He would make soft sounds when people entered the lab, sounds that seemed to be attempts at greeting them. He began to recognize individual researchers and would react differently to each one based on how they treated him. Commander Torres watched these changes with growing hope. If they could fully heal Big Guy's psychological wounds, they might gain, not just an ally, but access to an entire civilization of protectors who could help end the war. But she also knew that time was running out. High Command was still expecting results, and there were rumors that other Zephyrian bioweapons had been spotted near human colonies. The real test would come soon. Big Guy was healing, but was he strong enough to resist his programming when faced with real danger? And more importantly, would he choose to help the humans who had shown him kindness? Or would the decades of torture and brainwashing prove too strong to overcome? Jake seemed confident in his alien friend, but the adults knew that the biggest challenges still lay ahead. 2 weeks after Jake began working as Big Guy's translator, disaster struck the space station. Jake was having his morning conversation with his alien friend when alarms started screaming throughout the station. Red emergency lights flashed in every corridor as people ran to their battle stations. Commander Torres rushed into the laboratory where Jake sat with Big Guy. Her face was pale with worry. "We have a problem," she announced to Dr. Kane and the other scientists. "A Zephyrian battle fleet just came out of hyperspace. 37 warships, including their biggest dreadnought. They're surrounding the station." Dr. Kane felt his stomach drop. "How did they find us?" "They must have been tracking the bioweapon," Torres replied. "They want their property back, and they're not asking nicely." On the main communication screen, the face of Admiral Kraktar appeared. The Zephyrian commander looked like a cross between a lizard and an insect, with 4 eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. His voice was cold and threatening when he spoke. "Human station, you have something that belongs to the Zephyrian Empire. Return Subject 47 immediately, or we will destroy your station and everyone on it. You have 20 minutes to comply." Commander Torres looked at the tactical display showing all the enemy ships. The station's weapons were powerful, but not against odds like these. Even if they fought with everything they had, the station would be destroyed within minutes of a battle starting. "Can we evacuate?" Dr. Carter asked, thinking of her son and the other civilians on board. Torres shook her head. "Too many ships. They're blocking every escape route. Even our fastest shuttles couldn't get away." Jake had been listening to all of this while staying close to Big Guy's cage. The creature seemed to understand that something bad was happening. His 6 eyes were glowing brighter than usual, and his body was tense with alertness. "They want to take you back to the bad place," Jake said quietly to his alien friend. Big Guy made a sound that Jake had learned meant deep sadness. The creature knew what was happening. He had always expected this moment to come. For a brief time, he had experienced kindness and friendship, but now the nightmare would begin again. The minutes ticked by as Commander Torres tried desperately to find a solution. She contacted High Command, but the nearest human fleet was days away. She considered destroying the station rather than letting the Zephyrians recapture their bioweapon, but that would mean killing everyone on board, including hundreds of innocent civilians. With 10 minutes left on the Zephyrian ultimatum, Jake did something that surprised everyone in the room. Instead of saying goodbye to Big Guy or trying to comfort him, the 8-year-old boy stood up and looked directly into his alien friend's 6 eyes. "Protect us," Jake said with quiet confidence. The words were simple, but their effect on Big Guy was immediate and dramatic. The creature's entire body seemed to change. The artificial rage that had defined him for decades simply disappeared. His posture straightened, his eyes cleared, and for the first time since his capture, he looked like what he truly was, a guardian Dr. Kane's hands moved quickly over the containment controls. "Are you sure about this?" he asked Commander Torres. "Thorough. Boy seems to know what he's doing," Torres replied. "And we're out of options anyway." The containment field shut down with a soft, electronic sound. For the first time in months, Big Guy was free to leave his cage. Everyone in the room held their breath, expecting the creature to go wild with freedom. Instead, Big Guy walked calmly to where Jake was standing and knelt down to the boy's eye level. The mental connection that formed between them was so strong that everyone could see it. Both Jake and Big Guy's eyes began to glow with the same soft light. When Jake spoke, his voice carried strange harmonics that seemed to resonate through the station's hull itself. "He says thank you for reminding him who he was meant to be," Jake translated, though his voice sounded different somehow. "And he says not to worry about the bad ships outside. What happened next would be studied by scientists and military strategists for generations to come." Big Guy stood up to his full height and began to sing. The sound started as a low rumble deep in the creature's chest, but it quickly grew into something far more complex and beautiful. Layer upon layer of harmonics built on top of each other, creating frequencies that traveled through space itself rather than through air. It was the song of the Star Shepherds, the ancient melody that his people used to guide cosmic forces across the galaxy. The effect on the Zephyrian fleet was immediate and chaotic. Admiral Kraktar's angry demands for surrender turned to confusion as his ship's systems began behaving strangely. Navigation computers started receiving signals that told them to go in different directions. Weapon targeting systems locked onto empty space instead of the human station. Communication arrays picked up interference that seemed to carry meaning beyond simple noise. "What's happening to our ships?" Kraktar shouted at his bridge crew, but they had no answers. Across the entire Zephyrian fleet, similar chaos was erupting. The Star Shepherd's song was reaching into their technology and reminding it of older purposes. The computers and machines that the Zephyrians used for war had originally been created by peaceful species. Big Guy's song was calling to those peaceful origins, asking the technology to remember what it was supposed to do. Ship engines began firing in random directions, sending vessels spinning away from their attack formations. Weapon systems powered down as their targeting computers decided there were no valid threats to shoot at. Communication equipment started broadcasting the Star Shepherd's song instead of military orders, spreading the effect to even more ships. Within minutes, the entire Zephyrian armada was in complete disarray. Ships were flying in all directions, completely unable to maintain formation or coordinate their attacks. Admiral Kraktar's flagship spun helplessly through space as its navigation system insisted on taking it toward a nearby star to investigate some fascinating gravitational anomalies. The last enemy ship tumbled away into hyperspace, fleeing the system in confusion. Big Guy's song slowly came to an end. The creature looked down at Jake with an expression that could only be described as profound gratitude. "He wants to go home now," Jake said quietly, his voice returning to normal. "To find others like him and help them remember who they're supposed to be." Commander Torres nodded slowly. She was still trying to process what she had just witnessed. "I think we can arrange that." But first, she had a very interesting report to write for High Command. Humanity had just discovered something far more valuable than any weapon. They had learned that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to help someone remember their true purpose. Dr. Kane was already working on ways to contact the Star Shepherd home worlds. If Big Guy's people were willing to help, the war against the Zephyrians might finally turn in humanity's favor. But more importantly, they had made contact with an ancient civilization dedicated to protecting younger species. Jake spent his last day with Big Guy helping to prepare for the creature's journey home. A special transport ship was being arranged, one that could carry Big Guy safely across the galaxy to the regions where his people lived. "Will I ever see you again?" Jake asked his alien friend. Big Guy's response came as warm images in the boy's mind. Pictures of Jake as a grown man, working alongside Star Shepherds to protect planets and guide civilizations. The creature believed that Jake had the same protective instincts that defined his own people. "He says I might be part Star Shepherd, in my heart. Jake told his mother with a smile. He says that's why we could understand each other. Dr. Carter hugged her son tightly. She was proud of what Jake had accomplished, but she was also amazed by his courage and wisdom. Her 8-year-old boy had done something that the greatest military minds in human space could not do. As Big Guy's transport ship prepared to leave the station, Jake stood at the observation window and waved goodbye to his friend. The creature pressed one massive claw against the window from inside the ship, the same gesture they had shared when they first met. The transport ship engaged its engines and began the long journey toward the singing stars where Big Guy belonged. Jake watched until it disappeared among the distant points of light, knowing that he had helped bring a guardian home. Commander Torres stood beside the boy as they watched the ship leave. "You did something amazing, Jake. You saved all of us." Jake shrugged, the way children do when adults make too big a deal of something. "I just reminded him who he was supposed to be. Everyone needs friends to help them remember the good parts of themselves." As the space station returned to normal operations, Jake went back to being a regular 8-year-old boy. But everyone who had witnessed what happened knew that they had seen something special. Sometimes the most important discoveries are made not by the smartest scientists or the strongest soldiers, but by someone with the wisdom to see past surface appearances to the truth underneath. And sometimes, all it takes to change the galaxy is one small voice saying exactly the right words at exactly the right moment.